Welcome to the Craft Brew Alliance course on working with knives in the kitchen. During this course, you will learn how to set up your station to use your knives safely and effectively, identify various types of knives and their uses, prepare to use your knives, grip knives and food products properly, correctly cut and slice various types of food, care for and handle your knives, including sharpening your knives, and best practices for safety when leaving your station temporarily or for the day. And finally, how to store knives properly and safely in the dish pit. When you start your day, your first order of business is to make sure your station is set up properly. Start with a cutting board that is the proper size for the types of foods you will be preparing. Your cutting board should have a clean anti-slip mat underneath that will prevent your knives, tools, and food from slipping while you are cutting. Remember that it is important to change your mat after changing foods or every 2 hours to avoid cross-contamination. If you have any questions, make sure to check your state and local health code. Next, make sure you always have the following items prepared at your station: a cut glove, a bucket of clean sanitation water that gets changed every 2 hours or when it becomes soiled, a clean dry towel as you need it, protective gloves that you will wear anytime you are dealing with ready-to-eat food, the knife or knives that you will be using for cutting, and finally, ensure you have a mat under your feet for a safe place to stand. Now let's talk about the knives you will use for cutting food. You always want to have the right knife for the right job, a big one for a big job, a small one for a small job. Your most important knife, and the tool you will use for the majority of cutting, is the chef's knife. Use a good chef's knife to do pretty much anything in the kitchen. This is a straight utility knife. Most people prefer a chef's knife, but a utility knife can be used for cutting vegetables and other medium-sized tasks, depending on your preference. The paring knife is a small knife used for small jobs. You'll use the paring knife mainly for decorative cutting, but it's also handy for trimming berries or any other small task that requires delicate handwork. The boning knife comes in both stiff and flexible styles to fit different preferences. They are generally used for cleaning or deboning poultry and other meats. The boning knife is designed with a small tip that can fit into nooks and crannies, which makes it perfect for tasks like deboning. The serrated bread knife is generally used for cutting bread and sandwiches. The serrated edges do a good job of cutting through the tough, crusty exterior of a bread without crushing it. The slicer is a knife you typically see on the slicing station. The slicer is a large knife, so it's used mostly for large jobs. However, you may find it useful for smaller jobs too. For example, you can use a slicer for a large cut like roast beef, prime rib, or ham, and you can use it to skin salmon or another large fish, or even cut round cakes. The small marks on the side of the blade allow for a little air cushion while you are cutting, so meat's cut cleaner. So far, we've discussed knives that are used for cutting food. These knives are never to be used for cutting non-food items like opening boxes, prying open food cans, etc. There are knives for non-food related cutting, such as a safety knife. This knife is primarily used to open boxes or cut keg straps. It has no exposed edge, so it's virtually impossible to cut yourself with this knife. Remember, use this knife, and only this knife, for cutting things other than food. Now that we've discussed knives for both food and non-food applications, let's take a moment to discuss a knife that should never be used in the kitchen: a personal pocket knife. Please remember that pocket knives are never allowed at work, so do not bring it with you. We are in a kitchen, not camping. Now that we have discussed the items that make up your cutting station and we reviewed the various types of knives, let's talk about getting ready to cut food. First things first, put on your cut glove and a food-safe glove before you start cutting. You put the cut glove on the hand that will be holding the food and not doing the cutting. Make sure it fits nice and tight, down to the knuckles. You don't want any drag. The glove should be clean-fitting, with no slack at the end of your fingers. Next, put on another, thin, food-safe glove over the cutting glove to protect your cutting glove from the grime that accumulates while you're working. Like the cut glove, the food-safe glove should fit snug on each finger. Also, before you start cutting, you need to know how to safely hold both food and the knife. You hold the food with the claw grip, as demonstrated here. These two knuckles will act as your guide as to where to hold the food and where to cut. It's not your eyes that will tell you this information. It's these two fingers and the feel you have when touching the food next to where you will be making the cut. This is an example of how not to hold the food. Notice that this type of grip doesn't have a firm grasp of the food and your fingers are exposed to a cut. As for the knife, you hold it with what we call the pinch grip, which looks like this. You put your index finger on the outside of the knife, here, and your thumb will grab the back side of the knife, here. Now, these three fingers are all under the handle, making the knife secure in your hand. We use the pinch grip because it allows us to pivot back and forth, giving us more control of the knife. It also allows for less fatigue while cutting because your wrist will tire less quickly. This is an example of how not to hold the knife. Using a technique like this will result in wearing yourself out very quickly. Now let's demonstrate cutting a cucumber with a chef's knife. Using the claw grip, fingers on the bottom secure the food, and the two top fingers guide your cut. Take the knife using your pinch grip, put the tip down, angle where you want it to be, and make the cut. Push the slice out. Slide your hand down however far you want to make the next slice. There is very little movement, which is just enough to tell you how to cut. Now for a quick safety tip. Always keep the tip of the knife down on the cutting board. Work to establish this habit. For a sideways cut, make sure your hand is down flat, and with a pinch grip on the knife, slice through slowly and carefully, like this. Slice bread using a serrated knife. As demonstrated with the cucumber and paring knife, use the claw grip on the food and the pinch grip on the knife. The only difference is the handle. Remember, keep your fingers under the handle, below the blade so they are not exposed to a cut. Line up the knife alongside your fingers and slice straight through the bread. This gives you nice, even slices all along the way. Lettuce is best cut with a chef's knife. The lettuce should already be clean, so you just need to check the ends to be sure there's no browning. Lay the lettuce on its side with the leaves toward you. Using your claw grip to hold the lettuce, cut the lettuce lengthwise, but not going all the way to the end. Depending on the size of the lettuce, turn it over and make another cut lengthwise. Now the lettuce is split and ready to quarter. Using your claw and pinch grips, make your cuts. Throw away the nub and check again to be sure there's no brown lettuce. When cutting lettuce, never cut like this. Always make sure you are using the claw grip, covering your fingers. Do not lay your fingers out, exposing them to the blade. Cutting strawberries is a small job, so this task is best performed using a small knife, the paring knife. Using the same claw and pinch grip techniques, cut the top off the strawberry using your claw grip finger as your guide. You can also perform decorative cuts, like a fan for garnish. Using the same grips, hold your hand away from the blade, not under the berry, and make lengthwise cuts. Now to finish the original cut, using your hand as a guide, cut down, producing nice uniform cuts. Use your paring knife to cut a tomato of this size. You pinch up right here and lay across your hand just like this. These two fingers are the only ones that come in contact with the tomato. Notice in this grip that two fingers are back. Spin the tomato around and remove the core. Gently cut down the center line for a cored tomato. Gently poke into the tomato, right here. As this video demonstrates, there is little knife movement as the tomato itself is being spun around in order to remove the core. Once completed, cut along the center line to properly quarter the tomato. Next, we will demonstrate how to julienne and dice an onion. The chef's knife is the preferred knife for this task, and you will use the same claw and pinch grips as previously discussed. Start by trimming off the core end. Make the cut and try not to waste too much. Just trim the very edge of the root so the onion will stay together as it is being cut. Once you have a stable surface, cut the onion in half. Next, simply peel the onion with your hands. If you find yourself in trouble with some areas that don't want to come loose, you can always pick up your paring knife and trim any loose ends that you missed. Again, using the pinch grip, start with your knife at an angle and then move on through the onion. You can flip the onion over toward the end and then cut back toward it. Split up your onion pieces and now you have a julienned onion. When dicing an onion, it is important to do so slowly and carefully, as this type of cut can be particularly dangerous. First, you want to work from the back of the board using a clean and sharp knife. Start right here and make a sideways cut. From here, you can see the separate sections. Next, dice through the onion. Pull the onion sideways and make your additional cuts. Make an easy dice. Check to see that the cuts are all even, and you're done. Lemons are most commonly cut in the bar area, but they are also cut in the kitchen from time to time. For lemons, you will use your serrated knife. First, locate the butt ends of the lemon. Lay the lemon down and make your cut along the top hemisphere. Line the lemon up straight and cut off both the ends. Next, cut down the middle and lay it down flat so it's more stable and safer to cut. Next, make your cuts using the claw and pinch grips using your fingers as your guide. Cut straight through, then angle over. Turn the lemon around and cut through again for even quarters. When you cut lemon rounds or slices, the lemons can rock back and forth, so it's important to use the claw grip to hold the lemon steady. Make a clean, straight cut all the way through to the cutting board, and then make your slices. Stop whenever you feel comfortable. Do not expose your thumb like this to the cut when you cut a lemon. Instead, always keep your thumb under and use the claw grip. Also, do not expose the end of your fingers like this. Again, you should always use the claw grip. Finally, never hold the lemon in your hand and cut like this. Always cut the lemon on your cutting board. Now let's move from cutting to discussing the care and handling of your knives. Use a sharpening or honing steel between uses of your knife to keep the edges as clean and sharp as possible. Remember to have your cut glove on while using a sharpening steel and any time you are handling knives. Hold the steel in your non-cutting hand and, using the pinch grip, hold the knife. Make sure that your fingers are under these two edges of the sharpening steel here so they are protected by the guard. Generally, you want to angle the knife about 20 degrees, though the angle can vary depending on the knife. Make about 4 or 5 passes, like so. Any more than that, and you may dull your knife. When you're done, set your sharpening steel down. Use your sanitized rag to wipe down any metal shavings, and then use your dry cloth to ensure the knife is clean and ready to go. Then clean and dry your honing steel in the same fashion. If you are uncomfortable working your knife and honing steel in the way previously demonstrated, you can use this next approach, which may be easier, especially if you are new to the kitchen. Place your steel rod down and, using the same angles, make 4 or 5 passes, like this. Choose whichever method you feel most comfortable with, as either approach is acceptable and yield the same result. If you need to leave your station while it is still active, it is important to do so in a safe manner. Be sure your knife is pointing away from the edge of the cutting board and away from the counter, like this. Never leave a knife left on the counter with the butt end hanging out or on the counter where someone could easily knock the knife to the ground. This is a major safety hazard. When you're done for the day and it's time to clean up, you'll need to carry your knife and your cutting board and any related items to the dish pit or dish room. Remember to always carry your knife separately from the cutting board or other items. Never pick up the cutting board with the knife on it. Instead, take your knife first and then come back for your cutting board. To carry your knife to the dish pit or dish room, first check to be sure the aisle is clear. Then carry the knife at your side, like this, pointed down and a little bit away from your body. Call out "sharp knife" as you walk, and be sure to walk slowly to the dish pit or dish room. When you are finished using a knife, it should be stored in the appropriate area for cleaning and should be in a clearly marked container with the blade end of the knife facing down. Knives should never be stored in the container with the blade facing up, as this may cut someone who does not see it. Knives should also never be placed on the counter in the dish pit or in a sink that may contain other kitchen tools, such as pots or pans. Keeping your soiled knives in a clearly marked container with the handle facing up ensures the safety of all employees in the restaurant. If you are utilizing a dishwashing machine to wash your knives, you must ensure that knives are washed separately from all other kitchen tools. Knives must be laid flat, facing the same direction, and never be placed with the blade sticking upward. Make sure you never place knives underneath pots and pans, as pictured here, as this creates a serious safety risk to yourself and other employees who may reach for the pot or pan on top of the knife and not see the sharp knife below it. In this course, you learned about the knives you use daily in your job and best practices in the use and care of those knives. You learned how to hold your food and how to hold your knife for comfort, efficiency, and safety. You learned about the different ways of cutting and slicing various types of food. You learned about how to keep your knives sharp and how to handle them safely before, during, and after you use them to prepare food. We thank you for your time and hope you'll be able to apply what you've learned to make your work easy, efficient, and safe.